Everyone. I'm going to call to order, this is loud. I'm going to call to order the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection for Tuesday, April 5th, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Corbett, would you lead us, sir, in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Council. Good morning, Clerk. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll for us?
Von Hartung, Chair.
Here.
Alexis Hill, Vice Chair.
Here.
Bob Lucy is absent. Kitty Jung is absent. Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney Wade Carner.
Here.
And I'm Chief Deputy Clerk Kathy Smith. Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Public comment. Madam Clerk, I have no one signed in. Do we have anyone signed in wishing to speak at this time?
We do not.
Okay. If there's no one wishing to speak under public comment, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Chief, will you take us into item number 4?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 4 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among Commissioners will take place on this item.
Do you have any such items, Chief?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I've asked the clerk to hand out an article I think you'll find interesting. It is from Colorado Springs, and it relates to some of the same issues we're dealing with here in terms of 911 overload and how we prioritize EMS calls. I'd like to bring this back for a future agenda item because it's timely and that REMSA is advocating, I think rightly so, for a change in the way we respond to emergency medical calls. I think the board's aware that in the past, someone calls 911, we send a fire truck, we send an ambulance, and that's no longer sustainable in my opinion, and we're looking at a new dynamic to send the right resources to the right type of a call. And when there are low acuity patients whose condition is not life-threatening, we're not sending a fire truck, lights and siren, or an ambulance. So we're doing the smart thing by right-sizing the response. So I'd like to bring that back in May to talk about what REMSA is going to propose, perhaps even invite them back. But I think you would find this article interesting.
Okay, that's great. All right, and I look forward to that. I'm supportive of that. Commissioners, anyone at this time wishing to speak? Okay, all right. I will close item number 4. That takes us to item number 5, Chief, consent. Take us into consent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 are consent items, items A and B.
Commissioners, any questions on the consent agenda? Looking for a motion. Okay. Have a motion by Commissioner Herman, second by Commissioner Vice Chair Hill. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on the consent agenda?
We do not.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Right, Chief, that takes us now to item number 6.
Mr. Chairman, we're promoting David Corbett to fire engineer, and we have some ceremony for you.
Okay. Welcome.
Good morning. For the record, Chris Ketching, Division Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire. I'm really happy and honored to do the promotion for Engineer David Corbett. Engineer Corbett started his career with the fire service with the Nevada Division of Forestry in 2004, working with the conservation crews and the helitat crew. He was hired by Truckee Meadows in 2012. In 2014, Dave put himself through paramedic school and then was promoted to firefighter paramedic in 2015 before being promoted to engineer. His education has an associate's degree in physical education and a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and he's part of numerous committees and programs within the organization. He's on our wildland steering committee, our aviation committee, EMS committee. He performs quality assurance and quality improvement with our EMS program. He assists with our paramedic preceptor program and our EMS education programs. He does teach numerous EMS and wildland classes throughout the organization. And lastly, he's participating in a new program with the Nevada Division of Forestry as a paramedic on their helicopter hoist program. Dave's wife, Erin, will be pinning him today.
Yeah, go ahead. Hold on. Redo that so that your family can get a nice picture. You can step in front. It's all good. Congratulations. Can we take a picture?
Yes.
Chief? All right, let's take a picture.
I think you're going to do it. Yeah, follow Steve first. Do that.
Hey, get a center, Mr. Mayberry. Come on in, you guys. Come on. Get the family. Come on. Everybody here. We got lots of room on this side. Okay, perfect. Let me scoot over. Okay. Jill, tighter for me. Okay. Are you happy?
Outstanding. Thank you. Let me use your camera. Set it for me. Okay, you're welcome. All right. Good. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, congratulations.
In October, congratulations.
No, no. That's important. Yeah. It's, trust me. When you guys put in a ton of time, and you have to be supported. Oh, and you guys get married? Oh, goodness. Newlyweds. Yeah. Oh, no. Okay, those are always the good things, we appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, Chief, that takes us now into item number 7.
Mr. Chairman, I've been informed that union officials and officers are at a conference, so there is no report from them.
Okay. Actually, I knew that. All right, item number 8, it's your report, Chief.
Item 8, I'm going to start with Emergency Medical Awareness Pilot Program, and I alluded in the announcements that 911 is being overloaded with lots of calls, and in conjunction with REMSA, we decided to start launching some public education. This is actually Adam Mayberry's idea, and firefighter Sarah Nemeth actually gave some of the presentation, so we'd like you to hear from them, and they're going to talk a little bit about what we're trying to launch.
Mr. Mayberry, Ms. Nemeth, welcome.
Thank you, Chief Moore. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Adam Mayberry, Communications Officer. For the record, with me is Sarah Nemeth, firefighter, paramedic, one of my favorite people in the district, by the way. We are embarking on a series of workshops in honor of our golden anniversary, 50th anniversary of Truckee Meadows fires. One of the things we did earlier this year in March was a pilot program to kind of raise awareness for those residents who may have people that are living with them that may have chronic illnesses or elderly people. And we sort of tested the waters with this idea of educating our residents on how to prepare for those medical emergency situations so they can be better prepared, so we can be better prepared to serve them as well. firefighter, paramedic Nemeth prepared this program, and she's going to outline that real quick. And then we're looking at some other programs in the future to include wildfire preparedness as we begin to enter the warmer seasons. We'll have an open house that'll formally celebrate the opening of our Barron headquarters that we moved into right during COVID. So now that looks like we're getting over this pandemic, we'll be celebrating that as well, and we'll have a few other programs also. So thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time to highlight this program.
Good morning. As Adam and Chief Moore explained, we kind of decided that we could educate the public in a way that would really be beneficial, not only first responders, but the public as well. And, yes, sir.
Identify yourself, please, for the record.
Sarah Nemeth, firefighter paramedic
Thank
for Truckee
you.
Meadows.
Very important.
And so we basically, on March 15th, created a class that went over basic calls, basic emergency situations that the public might run into, give them a little bit of background, education, what they could be doing before that actually happened, what they could do when it happened, what it's like to call 911. So we worked really closely with REMSA. We actually had some REMSA dispatchers come into the class as well, explain to the public what it was like to call 911, what kind of questions like the dispatchers were going to be asking them, and then what it would be like for the first responders to show up on scene, and what it would like when we walk in. There's a group of us. So I always say it's a party when we call 911 because we've got an engine and an ambulance coming to that residence, and so not a lot of people are expecting for 7 people to walk into their home every time they call 911. And so we're kind of looking to change the program a little bit and go over actual 911 situations that require an ambulance and a fire engine. And as Chief Moore mentioned earlier, maybe modifying the class to not overload 911 as much as we have been, or maybe say that tow pain call or something like that. So it got a lot of great feedback. We had 15 people at that class, and there were a lot of questions about further classes and if there were other types of classes in the region. And we kind of did a little bit of research and couldn't find anything that was preparing people to be able to take care of elderly family members or children at home that have, diabetes or something like that. There's just not a lot of classes for education. So that's kind of the goal of the class, is to continue to educate and help the community as much as we can.
Okay. No, that's great. And this is something I know that this board has advocated for forever, of the right amount of response. You want to apply the right amount of force in any situation. If you need a lot of resources, you apply a lot of resources. But if I just, and you've heard me say this a million times, you guys, if I cut my finger off with the table saw, that doesn't require a ladder truck. I need 2 people, somebody to find my finger, somebody to stop the bleeding, and then maybe take me to the hospital because it's hard to drive. But, it doesn't require a full response. It just doesn't. And so I'm glad that we're looking at this. My concern, though, is that the public doesn't always understand how serious something either is or isn't. And that goes both ways. Sometimes it's not serious at all. My child is bent over in pain. They've got, deep stomach pains, and, come to find out, and this is going to sound a little weird, I actually know this to be true because it happened in my own family. They hadn't had a bowel movement in a couple of days. And so it did not require an emergency response. It required a different way, different method, right? But it could have been serious. It is possible that it was a burst appendix.
Absolutely, sir. And that's why we wanted to start with education and
Yes.
just basically teaching people the basics and warning signs to look out for. And not to say that, I agree with you, a lot of the public, every emergency is important to them.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
important to us.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to educate and be there for them in that emergency situation. And I think it just comes down to knowledge and education, and that's kind of the goal of the class.
Well, I'm glad we're leading this up, and thank you, Mr. Mayberry, for pushing on this. Ms. Neiman, thank you so much. Commissioners, any questions? Okay. Well, we look forward to seeing how this is going to work out. I know REMSA had something, it's not so much the training, but they had the nurses' health hotline or something of that nature where they were talking to people along the way to try to make sure that they really did need emergency services and could change the priority, based on the conversation that was being had.
Absolutely. And that was actually part of the class, was going over the nurses hotline as well
Okay.
in the class.
Good, all right. Okay,
And I think,
Chief.
Mr. Chairman, if you did cut your finger off with a table saw, which I hope never happens, 911 is the appropriate number to call.
yes, absolutely.
But there are some cases
Yeah.
where it's probably unnecessary, and I think that's the point of all of this, is when is it appropriate and when is it not? And when it is appropriate, we send the right resources, which doesn't necessarily mean that we need to get out the door in 30 seconds or 60 seconds. What REMSA is doing in its program is spending a little more time with the caller to understand exactly what's going on. There's something called echo determinants, where they ask a series of questions. My chest hurts, okay?
Right.
We're going out the door and we're
Yes.
screaming lights and siren. But if it's belly pain or something like that, they'll go through an interrogation a little more in depth to try to determine whether or not that's maybe appendicitis or is it something else.
Right.
And in which case, maybe it doesn't warrant a 911 response.
Right.
So that's the paradigm shift. We've taught the public to always call 911, and I don't want to discourage anybody from calling 911 when they think they have an emergency, but that whole EMD process is vital to the community if we're going to right-size and direct that patient to the right and appropriate care.
And our response as well, Chief, and I think it's not a discouragement of calling 911, it's trying to understand what amount of resource do we actually need to send to this for a particular emergency. And I think that's brilliant, it's a wise use of resources, and it's something that, again, this entire board has advocated for a very long time. And so I'm thankful that you guys are and it's not finally moving that direction, but we are moving that direction because we're a big community and we have a very large footprint, and it's difficult, and we've got multiple agencies, and so I think it's the right time to have the conversation.
And to give credit where credit is due, REMS is the tip of the spear on that argument.
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
don't want to leave them
And it's
out.
not, and that was not meant to say that if I did cut my finger off at the table saw, it's not an emergency, but it doesn't require a ladder truck. And so, I'm very careful with my table saw, by the way. That's why I have push sticks. All right, if there are no other questions, Chief, proceed.
Item 2 is capital projects update. In May, we'll be bringing you the bids for the residence remodel at Station 37. I think I've mentioned in meetings previous that we'll remodel the house first, move the crew into the house, then remove the modular, and then Phase 3 will be to level the site with the old apparatus bay and build the new apparatus bay. So all the projects that we're looking at are the Apple Fire Station, which Apple is funding, and we're proposing to fund the additional bay and some additional bedrooms to the station. The consolidated station that combines Station 32 on East Lake and Station 30 at Bowers
Okay.
is on the drawing table. The administrative building at Barron Way, we're looking at some modifications to fleet maintenance so that they can get apparatus in and out a little easier. A training component, and we unfortunately have run out of office space in just not even 2 years that we've been there. And then finally, Station 37, as I've mentioned. I will ask you to sit down when you hear the price on the projects because the costs of construction have gone way, way up.
Yeah.
And so we'll be dealing with that in our budget presentation. We've had some cost estimates from the Seymour contractor. The number is high. But it's high for everybody, unfortunately, and that's just the building environment that we're in.
Yeah, both labor and materials have just gone crazy. We know that throughout the region. So I think we'll, we understand. Let's just put it that way.
And we are proposing to bond finance all of those
Good.
projects, which Ms. Vance will address in her budget
When
presentation.
will you change Station 37 over to, because I believe it's now in District 4, Chief?
Ew. We will fix that next meeting,
Yeah,
Mr.
if you
Chairman.
guys can just look at that. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. The lines got redrawn. Station 37 in Hidden Valley is now in District 4. Okay?
Done. Item 3, spring green waste update. We've already done one event, as mentioned in my memo, and we've got 3 more coming up. And Mr. Mayberry will certainly push those out. Item 4 is pile burning. I'd like Chief Kukulas to let you know what our experience is already in April.
Yes.
Usually in April, we're still pretty wet, but we've now had two brush fires of small ones, but nevertheless, I think it merits some discussion. I'm sorry, it's going to be Chief Ketchum. Merits some discussion about the dryness. I've gotten some complaints that pile burning has ended,
Yes.
but 2 fires already suggest that it's extremely dry. And
Right.
we haven't even really entered what we would normally say is our wildland.
Yeah, because of
Fire.
escaped embers and et cetera. Is that what happened in the pile burns?
Make sure I do this right. Good morning again. For the record, Chris Ketchering, Division Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire. To answer your question, yes, without the moisture that we've had for the last couple of months, the fuel's been really dry. Last week, we did have a fire in Verdi. It was about 1 acre in size. It was from burning. The gust of wind came through, blew some embers out. The fire burnt down towards the Truckee River, so there was no threat to any homes. And then last night, resources responded to a small fire along the Jones Creek trailhead up on the Mount Rose Highway. The fire was stopped and contained just under a 1/4 acre. It is being investigated at this time just because it was on the edge of the trailhead. We had 4 resources from Truckee Meadows. The jurisdiction was U.S. Forest Service land. They responded and took the fire over from us. It was wind tested all night. It held. It didn't grow. They'll have resources on it all day today as well.
Okay.
Also, our NV Energy crew did respond, stayed till about midnight, and they were finally released.
Okay, good.
Any other questions?
Any questions, commissioners? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, interesting time of year. Chief?
Finally, on our mutual aid tabulations, you may have noticed in our incident summaries, we've not tabulated our mutual aid
Right.
yet. And the reason for that is that because we're on a new CAD system with REMSA, there had to be a re-engineered process between REMSA's CAD and Washoe County's GIS so that we could tabulate those accurately. But I'd like to propose to the board a simpler way of tabulating these responses. Mutual aid is sometimes difficult for the layman to understand, and there's different definitions all over the place. There's the National Fire Incident Reporting System definition of mutual aid, which it's only mutual aid to the U.S. Fire Administration when 2 agencies are on the same call. That's the only time they want us to report mutual aid. The reason is so we don't count calls twice.
Right.
So if we were to answer a call for City of Sparks, or Sparks was to answer a call for us, according to the NFIRS definition, it's not mutual aid. But the average citizen would understand, well, you assisted Sparks on a call, of course it's mutual aid. So there's another way of counting that. Then there's automatic aid. We've been counting enhanced automatic aid, which is our exclusive relationship with City of Sparks, where we're sending the closest unit and dropping boundaries. And then there's normal mutual aid, which when we answer a call for another jurisdiction, that you and the public may understand, well, that's mutual aid if we answered a call for any other jurisdiction, whether it be NDF or the Forest Service last night, whatever that is. So there's a lot of definitions out there, and it's hard for staff to kind of track those, and it's hard for my staff to properly categorize those in their incident report. So what I would like to report to the board is we simply count the calls as call to another jurisdiction, and we just count them in the total aggregate. The way that will happen is GIS will plot the addresses that they get in the month, and they'll count however many times we landed in the City of Sparks, the City of Reno, Forest Service, BLM, and we'll just represent that as an aggregate number.
Okay.
And I think it would simplify the accounting on that and just make the report a
So just
little more interesting.
merely assistance to a regional partner.
Yes.
Okay? Yes, go ahead. how had we been doing it?
Well, we had been doing it, as I mentioned at the start, as we tried to break them all down for, here's mutual aid, automatic aid, enhanced aid.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody other than maybe my staff really understands
Right.
the differences in those definitions. So
It's just one column now, whereas there were many. You'll have to remind me. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But then, would you add those all up essentially, if you were to compare month to month, like April 2021 to April 2022? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
And it would be the same, just calling it one thing instead of 4 or 5 different categories.
yes, it's
Okay.
simply a call to another jurisdiction, both given and received. So with Sparks answers a call for us and vice versa, that'll be tabulated along with a year-to-date number.
Okay, just as long as we can count the same year-over-year total, that's my only concern.
And we can go back in previous years and just retabulate those easy enough. So you can see a multi-year comparison as well as to a month-to-month comparison.
It's just easier for especially someone like me that I don't know, I'm still learning, so, to be able to look, at the same data and understand what that looks like, that would be helpful for me.
Okay, and as long as they're segregated out, Chief, to whom we gave aid to,
Yes,
because that's important. Whether we gave it to Pyramid, or whether Pyramid gave it to us, or Sparks gave it to us, or we gave it to Sparks, or, Reno gave it to us, or we gave it to Reno.
that is exactly how we would
Good,
tabulate.
okay, I like it.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? So before we get off of this, on to item B, one more emendation, ladies, and that is Wadsworth Station 225 is now in District 5. Okay, thank you so much. Chief?
That
Item
is
B.
the end of my report, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions about item B.
Oh, okay, okay. There's no 8B, review of critical calls?
I have no comments to offer
Okay,
unless there's
all right, very
there's,
good.
questions.
Okay. No comments to the chief? All right, let's take on to item number 9. Chief, open us up.
Item 9 is a recommendation to acknowledge the status report regarding the current fiscal year 2021 to 2022 budget and discussion regarding the priorities and projects anticipated for the fiscal year of 22-23 budget. And Ms. Vance will give you a breakdown of where we're at financially and some of the issues that we're looking at for next year's budget to propose.
Ms. Vance, welcome.
Chief Fiscal Officer. So we are in the preliminary stages for the budget. Actually, the tentative budget has to be filed on April 15th. When this was prepared, we were still waiting for some numbers, so I will give you some additional numbers over this presentation. So this is a general fund budget review, and where we were as of February 28th for the posting deadline, where we were, what our budget is, where we were, and then compared to the exact same time as last year. So you can see that we are running ahead of last year. We're running right about budget for property taxes. We do have about 22 million currently, and that does include the fourth quarter. So property taxes will probably hit very close to budget. We might see an additional $1 million come in between now and June 30th. That would put us about $500,000 above budget. Consolidated taxes, the budget was set by the state at 10 million, 10.2, 10.3 million. As of February, that was through December's, collections was 5.6 million. We do look like we're probably going to end up at about 800,000 above budget on that one currently. We're running 8% above budget through January. The last one was just over 800,000. That's, I think, the last one that we did collect for relates to January's C-tax, because we were running about 12% above last year, and then December hit and it was only about 6%. So we didn't know if that was a trend, a new trend that we're going to see, but January's was back up to about 12%, which is about 8% above budget.
everybody had bought everything all year long, and then they
Yeah.
didn't buy anything for Christmas because they already had everything that they needed.
But fortunately, they're buying again, I guess, in January. Okay. So that leaves us at our total revenue is about 26 million as of February 28th of a budget of 38 million. Our expenditures were about 26 million, with the total expenditures budgeted at just over 39 million. So we are running a little bit ahead in expenditures, and we do expect some augmentations to be brought back in May. And most of that relates to the ambulance program, which we did say we were going to bring back that augmentation. So we'll know exactly how much that'll cost and pull that augmentation into this year. And then with the fiscal year 23 budget, we will develop the new EMS proprietary fund, and that'll come with the budget recommendations. Some of the new programs that are in full swing this year, the fuels program, which relates to NV Energy, NDF, paying for a lot of the fuels work. We had budgeted at 1.9, and currently we're at about 1.3. So that is looking to actually be a little bit above budget, and that'll be part of our augmentation. We had a purchase order increase during the year, so there were new positions that were allowed, and then they also did some additional equipment to be purchased. The ambulance and moving vehicle accident claims, we budgeted fairly conservatively. We had I think we were running about 5 or 6 months during fiscal year 21, so this is the first year that it was all year. We budgeted $320,000 for that program, but even as of February, we're already at $386,000. We were above budget, so that is going to definitely, obviously, be above budget, and we'll look at a higher budget for fiscal year 23, and most of those programs will also be into the new EMS program. Prevention permits was budgeted conservatively at 125, and that's at about 136,000. So last year, we did start charging for our plan reviews and permits and building permits on that one. Okay. Our current year, actually, for fiscal year 23, we are looking about 23.9 million in property taxes. That's not on any of the slides. It was new information that we received since we did this, and that's about a 6% increase. And the C-tax revenue estimate from the state is 12.1, which is, I think, about an additional 9% over the budget of fiscal year 22.
Okay.
So overall, I think we were looking about a 10% increase in total revenues for fiscal year 23 for general revenues, including property tax, C-tax, and then the other taxes and incomes. Okay. For our priorities that we're looking at for fiscal year 23, let's see. Some of the other items I want to mention that are not on the list. So we have growth in the fuels program and increased funding to peer support program. Those are items that the board has directed us to kind of look at. So we want to make sure that's appropriately funded. Our new EMS proprietary fund, so we'll get our GEMT revenues. Those should start coming in next fiscal year, possibly the end of this fiscal year, but they would be used for next fiscal year. Additional positions contemplated are additional financial staff just to address the growth, and then a capital projects and asset manager. The county has asked us actually to get our own asset manager instead of using CSD because they are overwhelmed too. Okay. We do have, as Chief had mentioned, significant capital projects that we have an expectation of the bond funding. That will come probably as an augmentation. It won't be included in the exact amount of the bond funding, won't be included in the budget. But once we know, as we develop those costs, we want to make sure we know exactly or as close to exactly how much the project will cost before we do the bonding. And then that'll come as a budget augmentation where we'll have the proceeds of the bond and then the uses of the bond. The cost of capital, as Chief had mentioned, is growing, and unfortunately, so are interest rates. From our bond counsel or bond consultant, they did say to expect 4.5% to 5% interest, where we were getting just over 1% before. Yeah, so that is a consideration that we are definitely balancing with the budget.
So before you move off of that, I have a question. Do we have any other options? Can we go with the state revolving fund?
We're going to have our bond council look at that too and everything.
Okay.
So we're setting up a meeting with them in 2 weeks.
Because usually the state revolving fund is lower, let's just say. So, I mean, if there's an opportunity, and are these bonds, are they 20 or 30?
Looking at about probably 25 years.
25, okay. Okay,
Maybe we have to do 30 if they're that high.
yeah, well,
Possibly.
yeah, sadly, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and the infrastructure bank through the state, I think would be worthwhile to
Okay.
look at. These are projects that it sounds like could be shovel-ready. We know what we want to do, and I think the state they may forgive some of that request. So,
Will they fit into infrastructure? Will it fit into that category?
well, some of the things that we're wanting to, this is probably a little different, the new things that we want to bond, the renovations to the administrative building and the things that the chief were going over, that may be something that's worthwhile speaking to the state about.
Okay, certainly
Yeah,
we'll look
no,
into that.
good
Thank you.
suggestion.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you never know until you ask.
Yeah, and I think that they want to have some, to show some really great capital investments in government, and I don't think a lot of people have taken advantage of it. So I think it's worthwhile to look at that, but at very, very low interest rates as well through them if we do have to pay it back.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, Spence, yeah, no, go right ahead.
So just the outlook of what we will be doing, again, April 15th is the tentative budget, and that's filed with the state just with the department signature. We will bring back a additional presentation next month, May 3rd. We'll give a little bit more detail of what's on that and look for further advice from the board on any changes. And then the final budget to be adopted through a public hearing would be May 17th. So that'll be a special meeting.
Okay.
So with that, we are looking for any direction from the board on,
So I
That
do
hasn't been
have
provided.
a couple other questions.
Okay.
Our increased funding for the peer support program, I'm fully supportive of this. Are we regionalizing that? Are we making sure that we're connected with, police and other first responders, emergency room and et cetera?
You have Chief Kukulis address that.
Because they have peer support programs as well, and as we have all come to the conclusion of, anytime we start duplicating those services, it's just, it gets to be expensive, and it's not always a prudent use of taxpayer dollars, because everything becomes siloed.
Good morning. For the record, Alex Kukulis, Deputy Fire Chief. Yes and no, I guess. I've had some conversations with Steve Nicholas, our clinician embedded with TM, as well as Chief Derek Reed, who's the president of the Nevada Peer Support Network. There are some ideas floating around about trying to regionalize those efforts, and I think it's sort of in its infancy right now with some of the clinicians they've got and their board with the Peer Support Network. I do see, opportunity to leverage that and make it more efficient for purposes of the budget that we're talking about for next fiscal year. The lion's share of that increase is to keep that contract with Dr. Nicholas for
Yes.
us. And we're still, in my opinion, getting a bargain for that at what we're paying. It's not unlike with the sheriff's office. They actually have, I think, 2 or even 3 possibly embedded clinicians with them. And so, our relative size, it about makes sense. But yes, to your question, I think they're working in that direction. They just want to make sure that they vet some differing programs and how to bring it all together. And it may be through the Nevada Peer Support Network that sort of houses that, and everyone contracts with them. But that, again, I don't want to get out over our skis on that, and that's Chief Reed's baby. So.
No, and I understand. I want to make sure that we're having these conversations for the simple reason that many of the same incidents, you would see law enforcement responding to, let's just say a multiple vehicle accident where you had fatalities. You'd see law enforcement and firefighters, it's all connected. It's all connected. Those issues are, they're the same regardless of what agency responds.
They are, and we're trying to balance, having an asset that we have familiarity with, like Dr. Nicholas, versus, having a revolving set of doctors that you don't have, that same relationship with. But while trying to leverage, you can't rely on one person to always be available, so you need to have some backup. And while Truckee Meadows, I think, has one of the best programs in the country for that matter, we recognize there's some smaller agencies that surround us that don't have the same wherewithal and ability. So we want to bring everybody together and see if we can make a better program together.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. It's important for all of the partner agencies. It's we recognize the need. That's all I'm going to say. So, good. Thank you so much. One other question, Ms. Vance, and that is, while we're seeing nice increases in our revenues, that does not last forever. And so my hope is that we're working with the bargaining unit and trying to make sure that if maybe let me rephrase that. When we turn down, it's only a matter of time. These things are cyclic. We have some methodology in place that we've sort of stuffed some money away so that we can withstand those downturns, and we don't have to reduce programs and lay off staff. I always hate that, but it comes from good planning.
Certain programs we do budget on an annual basis. They're, whether it's in it, they're items that can be like whether it's the wet team training or the hazmat training.
Sure.
So those are the things that we do realize would probably be cut before, obviously staff, but also we're branching out with the ambulance program and trying to bring in new revenues with NV Energy supporting much of our staff, and then also the GEMT to continue to have other sources of revenues, but we are in negotiations, so those discussions are also happening with IAFF.
I just want to make sure we have a plan.
Yes,
Rainy day,
yes.
when I was in business for myself, and that was what I solely did, I had no less than 6 months worth of income saved all the time, no less.
Okay.
And most of the time, it was a full year that if I, for whatever reason, I couldn't work, I was able to, at least pay my bills. Wasn't going to be easy, but.
We do continue to make sure that ending fund balance can support at least 2 months. The NRS standard is about 16.67, which is about 2 months worth of
Yes.
expenses, so.
Again, it's
It's kinda that
important.
balancing,
It's
of
important
course.
that we plan for that, and I'm hopeful that all of our staff recognizes the need for that.
Yes.
Because things can change in a moment's notice. You just never know.
Agreed.
Okay? Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Vance, could you go back to the second slide where it has just the budget overview?
Yes.
Thank you. You were saying that our total expenditures, did I hear you say 36 million? You said our
26
26, okay. And are at what percentage higher than,
They're currently running right at what we would
Okay.
expect. However, our payroll does run about a month.
oh,
So we are, it looks like about 1.6 million, which was what we expected with the new ambulance program.
okay,
And then those GEMT monies will come in next year, but we didn't expect that we would need to front that.
got it, yes. And that's when that was brought to us, we knew that, okay. The other thing that I'm wondering as part of the budget priorities, should we build in any EMS contingency, technology contingency? It's a new program. I don't know if you've thought about this, Chief, just to make sure that, we're just in the same way for homeless services, we had to build in a lot of contingency, and we're still finding there's additional expenses when the county took that on. I just don't know if that's something we should look at.
With respect to our EMS services ambulance?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Well, we'll be bringing you some discussion about working closer with REMSA in the next month or two.
Okay.
So there could be a wholesale change in the way that budget's going to look,
Okay.
potentially. And we'll need the board to give us direction or hold the course on what we're doing.
Okay,
So I don't know that there's excess reserves there, but the program is paying for itself
Okay,
with ambulance transports and then eventually GEMT. It's really at a cost neutral.
great. I just want to make sure there wasn't any new technology that we needed to account for or anything else like that.
Well, I think the big change would be the common CAD that all the jurisdictions are working on, and that will need to be funded, but and probably financed, I'm guessing, because it's going to be
Right.
several $1 million. But I think from a technological standpoint, that would be the thing that we're looking at.
Okay, all right. Well, those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman, anything? Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Vance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I just wanted to circle back on one thing about capital projects, that I had discussions with Director Smith at the county about how we would do project management, and I want to make sure that the board's comfortable with this. He would like TM to hire the projects manager within its own budget rather than having somebody who's under his staff provide the services and we exchange that money through
okay,
the county cost allocation plan.
right.
So if we do that and the board approves that in the budget, we would add asset management to that list of in addition to project management, and in addition to building the new facilities. So they would go back and look at our existing facilities. I think that's something that Commissioner Lucy had asked for, is just what's the condition of our current facilities and what needs to be planned for in the years ahead. And then Division Chief Shum right now, in addition to his duties of training chief, manages logistics and fleet. So in order, and this was in our strategic plan, in order to give more focus on training, that Chief Shum would become specifically just training only, and we would take those duties of fleet management and logistics management and also add that to the plate of the projects manager, which could be a full plate, but nevertheless, it's probably the most efficient thing that we could do for that position and make sure that position's busy and is doing good work for the district. So that is the direction that we're going to recommend next month.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that?
And that would be a full-time position within the district, not a contracted.
Full-time.
Okay,
yes.
great.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Carter, this is for possible action. Do you want us to take any action on this? Do you want us to accept the report? I mean, we've kind of bounced a few things around, but do you require us to?
No, I don't think any action is necessary.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. If there are no other questions for the chief or no other comments, Chief, take us into item number 10.
Item 10 is a recommendation to approve an annual performance evaluation of District Fire Chief Charles Moore to include a discussion of results, goals, and objectives, and authorize the fire chief to enter into negotiations and to bring back an amendment to his current contract regarding benefits and contract extension. Mr. Ribbiaga will present you the process, but I will mention and preface the discussion that my current contract ends at the end of this calendar year. So the board wants to entertain me going a little bit longer and getting some capital projects done and some other good work for the district. I'm willing to look at another couple of years if the board wants me to stick around.
Okay, so let me ask council a question. Can we go through this? Is that okay today? But I think that's a wider question that I would like
Right.
the full board to be.
At another
have that
agenda
conversation.
item.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah, so we can certainly talk about this today, or board, because we are missing two of our members. Would it be, so Counselor, would it be appropriate for us to bring this item back, table it for now, and bring it back on a future agenda? Are we bound by because I know we've got some statutory requirements, but would we be okay to do that so that we have the two other sitting commissioners? And especially because we're talking about the chief's contract, we're talking about any potential raises or bonuses or any of those other things.
Yeah, that would be appropriate to table this item for the next meeting.
Okay. Commissioners,
Sounds good.
would you like to entertain that? Do you want me to take a motion on that, or can I just do it?
I think you can just do it.
Okay, so Commissioners, I'm going to table item number 10, and we'll bring that back. But what I will do, because there was possible action, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can we bring it back with a broader discussion on, because this current contract, so I don't think we got the background on the contract. So maybe we need that for the future items, so we can also have that discussion.
Okay?
And
If we're going to increase if we're looking at the contract at this particular time, I too would like to see that. So, unless that's going to come back to us at the expiration of the contract,
Yeah.
which is at the end of this year.
I'm not sure how it works, because
Yeah.
I remember I was looking at last year's, and there was goals, and I think now I'm not remembering.
Accomplishments.
And accomplishments. And so will we discuss that as well?
Yes.
Okay. And will we have that written for our next review? Okay. So in May, we can discuss
And-
that. That's
And-
great.
And if we are going to bring your contract back at that time, Chief, if we are going to give an extension at that time, I certainly want the contract to be part of the agenda item so that we know what we're voting on, what has been in the past, and what the terms of that agreement look like.
And would they be two separate items, Counselor?
Mr. Carner?
Those would probably be two separate items. This current agenda item authorizes the chief to then go into negotiations to where we would start talking about how
Okay.
that new contract would look, which would
Okay, that's fine.
come back at a later meeting.
Fine, yeah, then just bring us back those two items, and then we'll go from there,
Very good.
okay? Is
Sounds
everybody okay
great.
with that?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Chief, item number 11, is there a requirement for a closed session?
Mr. Chairman, we would ask that there be a closed session to discuss labor issues.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us into item number 12, and then we will go ahead and we'll take our final public comment, but we will go into recess. Is that the way you'd like to do it, Mr. Carner? We'll go into recess, we'll convene upstairs, and then after we're done, we'll open the door and ask for our final public comment. Is that okay?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. All right, Chief, take us into item number 12, if you would.
Item 12 is Commissioners' Fire Chief's announcements, request for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among Commissioners will take place on this item.
Do you have anything else, Chief?
No, sir.
Okay, Commissioners? Okay, all right. That will take us now to item 13. We'll do our final public comment. Madam Clerk?
No one has signed in.
Okay, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Commissioners, we will be in recess. We will convene upstairs for our closed session, and then we will open the doors and take our final public comment. We are in recess.